welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you haven't seen any of my other videos before, then my name's Katie. I'm an artist and illustrator, and every couple of weeks I do a roundup of my daily art challenge. So I started this back in August, where I draw 6 days a week, and here on YouTube I share what I've created and talk a little bit more in detail about the process and what materials I've used and how I feel about each piece. Today I'm going to be rounding up week 34 and 35. We hit day 200 and also 2/3 of the way through of my yearly challenge, so I'm just going to jump right in and show you each piece. So to kick off week 34 and day 198, I did another spread in my A5 Talens sketchbook, which at the time only had 3 spreads left in the sketchbook. I created this spread with references from National Geographic magazines. So at the weekend I went to a car boot sale and picked up a couple of magazines from the 1980s, and I've really been enjoying referencing those lately. If you watched my previous video, you'll know that I found a Tumblr which had a lot of lovely images, so I was really excited to find these magazines in real life and draw from them. And I'm really pleased with these. I think the one on the left is definitely more successful. I worked on a timer for these, so they both took 15 minutes each. And I just feel like I captured the light in this one really nicely. I start with a base layer of gouache and then I add details on top depending on how much time I have left using NeoColors and Prismacolor pencils. So I actually scanned in a lot of these images from these magazines and they are available on Patreon if you're interested, and you can get those on the lowest tier, which is £3 a month plus VAT. So if you did want to see more of my references, that's going to be a post which I share every month using some of my favourite reference sources. The one on the right I still really like, but I feel like this one works a lot better. It's a lot more detailed. I think this one was quite a tricky photo to reference, especially using a 15-minute timer. So I think this one would have worked better if I had a little bit more time. But as a spread I really like it, and I also really like the coloured borders I used to create the panels first. Day 199 I was sticking in my A5 Royal Talens sketchbook, and this one was just a really fun one to create, and this is a red gurnard fish. And I was just really pleased with this one. I really love how his face turned out. I think he looks like a really cheeky little fish, and I really was happy with the colours. At first I painted this with like a seabed at the bottom, but it just felt a little bit wrong, and so that meant I wasn't happy with it. But when I covered it up with some more gouache and made the whole background like one colour, I think it works a lot better. This is kind of similar to some other pages I've done in here when I did like a chicken, and I think I did another fish as well. And so I feel quite comfortable doing this subject, and this again is gouache, NeoColor Pastels and Prismacolor Pencils. It's kind of messy. I like to add a lot of texture in using the mixed media on the background, but yeah, I really love the colours of this one. It's obviously a very bright fish. I definitely ramp up the saturation whenever I draw things like this, so he's a little bit more dulled in real life. But I just thought it was quite successful and I had a lot of fun painting him. Day 200 is the very last spread in this A5 sketchbook, so I moved on to a new one, but I was really pleased with this landscape piece. And this was created using a Google Maps reference, so I really enjoy exploring on Google Maps and dropping my pin in random places. And this time I dropped it near the coast in Cornwall, so this is Nair Head, and I was really happy with how this one turned out. I wanted to keep things nice and loose, so it's a lot more scribblier than I would normally paint. It's also slightly muted in the greens, but the thing that I think is most successful about this piece is the lines which I added on the sea. I was really happy with how that turned out and like mimicked the waves and all the movement on the water. And once I added that in, I really enjoyed how this spread sort of came together. I think just having that extra bit of detail made it feel a bit more finished, because obviously it was very loose and scribbly, and I think just that tiny bit of detail using the Prismacolor pencils really helped bring it all together and made it feel finished for me. I also like some of the burgundy details I added. I think that helps. I think you might have seen before that I've added pops of pink and like peach tones to a lot of my landscape scenes. So this is a similar sort of thing, but with the burgundy. And I just really like this piece. I think it gives a really nice atmosphere, and it was quite a quick one for me to paint as well. If you follow along on Instagram, then you'll know I've been doing an interactive road trip type thing once a week. So I've been using my 12x12 mini Royal Talens sketchbook and documenting a little interactive road trip on my stories and putting out polls so you can vote on what I draw on that day. And I've been trying to do this once a week, and on this week it was a similar thing. We went inland and I asked a few polls and questions, and that decided what I was going to pop in the sketchbook spread for that day. I think this is one of my favourite spreads in the sketchbook so far, and certainly from the Pacific Coast Highway journey that we're doing. I was really happy with the tones and the colours. It kind of feels quite different from the other ones. It feels softer and a bit more muted in terms of like the colours. Certainly the mark making was a bit different to some of my previous spreads, and it just feels very peaceful and calming, which I really enjoy. I had a really good time painting these. This one I did with gouache first, and then again added in NeoColors and coloured pencils, but mostly this one was lacking on the NeoColors and heavily relied on the gouache, whereas I think all the other spreads is a little bit more heavy on the NeoColor pastels, which is probably why this feels a little bit more muted. So I really like the waterfall scene, but I'm especially proud of that RV. I don't draw vehicles much, but I'm trying to push out of my comfort zone a bit, and I was really happy with how that one turned out. I think the perspective and the proportions on it worked out nicely, and I think the colour of it also stands out nicely against the trees. So definitely a successful spread on my Pacific Coast Highway road trip, and I always enjoy adding the interactivity elements to it and getting some feedback from my audience as well. So day 202 is in my new Royal Talens sketchbook, which is the pink A5 one. And for this one, I definitely stepped out of my comfort zone and did something that I never usually draw, and that is people. So this one I'm really pleased with. I'm obviously not very comfortable drawing people because I feel like I haven't determined my style with those yet. So I was really interested in seeing how my style and my confidence with landscapes would translate now that I'm so confident doing those that I try something new. And I feel like looking at this spread you can still see it is my style, which made me really happy. I was really pleased to see that that comes across. I'm not so happy with like the girls' faces. I do really like this one with the hat. I really enjoy doing eyes like that, but obviously I can't draw every person with their eyes closed, so I think the reason why I shy away from drawing people is just because there's so many elements that can be stylized, and it changes things so much, like doing the nose in a certain way or doing the eyes like just as little dots, or actually drawing like more detail into them. So this one came quite naturally to me. I tried not to overthink it and I just did it how felt best for me. So considering that, I am really pleased with this, and I definitely want to explore like stylizing more people and seeing how that works with my style now I'm so confident with drawing other things. I also really like that I filled the whole spread and went edge to edge with the colour, and yeah, I was pleased with this one and definitely something I want to explore more. Day 203 is the only loose piece which I did in these 2 weeks, but I was really happy with this one, and you might have already seen it if you saw last week's YouTube video. So I did film the process of this one. I made a reel from it, and also last week's video shows the real-time process. And this is using a technique which I don't do very often, so it's still quite new to me. And it's where I use a flathead brush and try and keep it quite blocky and graphic. This was a reference from real life, which I don't often do, but I had this gorgeous bouquet of flowers from Mitch and I just really enjoy painting them. And I really love the colours. I'm really happy with how this piece turned out. I do think I overworked it a bit. I think I can definitely practice this technique more to try and get it in a way where I don't overwork it. I think because it was so new to me, I kept adding and I don't think I needed to. But overall, I think it's okay. I don't think like I muddied it or anything. I'm still really happy with the vibrancy of the roses. I really love this green with the orange and the pink, and there are also some pops of purple in there, which I think looks really nice together. So yeah, this one was pretty different for me, but definitely a technique I enjoy, and because it's so slow and I have to really think about where I place my marks, I do find it really mindful. And it was nice to paint some flowers in a way where I wouldn't normally, and also do a loose piece that's not in my sketchbook. On to week 35 now and day 204. I'm back in my A5 Talens, and I did another one of these panel spreads which you might have seen in my sketchbook before. But this time I went on to MapCrunch and explored Australia. So if you haven't heard of MapCrunch before, it's a random Google Maps generator, and I generally pick a country first and then generate the scene from there. And this time I went Australia. Usually I kind of keep Northern Hemisphere, but I wanted to push myself a little bit. And I'm really happy with this spread. I'm really pleased with the colours. I love how the greens and blues sit with the orange. So again, like in the National Geographic one, I drew the panels first using this orange tan tone colour. And you can see that's like reflected in some of the buildings as well, like the roofs and the bricks. So this one actually took quite a while. The panel ones always do. They take a little bit more time than they look. Obviously this is very like rough and messy, but there's a lot of details there that I wanted to capture. So for this spread I didn't use Gouache at all. I only used Prismacolor Pencils, NeoColor Pastels, some Tombow brush pens and Ecoline brush pens. And I really enjoy these because I can kind of switch off. The view is there in front of me and I don't have to think so much. And I also pre-draw the panels so I know how I'm going to fit it all in. It's definitely messier than some of my other panel spreads, but I was really happy with how this turned out, and I definitely want to do more of these. Day 205 was another Google Maps adventure. This time I went to Wales, dropped a pin randomly, and found this scene. And when I painted this one, there were definitely elements I liked more than others. I'm really happy with the right side of the spread. I'm pleased with the buildings and the lighting and the shadows, and I also really like some bits in the foreground like the postbox and some of the like scratchier details. But when I painted this, I was a little bit unhappy with it, and when I was photographing it I realised that I kind of prefer it as a square sort of format. Now I know some pieces like need that breathing space, so it doesn't all have to be filled in, but I definitely feel like it lacked details over here, which is why I was leaning more towards this side of the picture than this side. It just feels like there's no interest here at all, and I didn't finish it to the same standard. So I kind of cropped the photo when I photographed it for Instagram and just did this bit, and I was really pleased with it like that. It kind of feels like a children's book spread because of the colours, and like I said, I was really happy with the lighting and some of the details. I also played a little bit with like creating distance, so you can see back here they're lighter and softer marks, and the colours are a lot more pastel than in the foreground, so I think that worked really well and something I've explored before. So it was nice to see me using that again without necessarily actively thinking about it. But yeah, looking back, I think it's fine. I think I was being a little bit harsh on myself about this bit, but as a full A4 spread I do really like it. For day 206, I did another plein air piece in my A5 Talens sketchbook, and one of my art goals for this year was to draw more outside, and so far I've managed to do that every week, and this was no different. So I was dropping Mitch off to work, and I decided to stay and draw this lake which was nearby. And as with most of my plein air pieces, there are bits that I dislike about it, and it definitely always feels different to how I actually paint in the studio. And I really want to work hard on like merging those things so my style looks the same whether I draw outside or in. But there are things I like about this, like the buildings. I was really pleased with how that turned out because that was quite minimal, and I just used a Tombow brush pen to map out the windows, and I also like how the trees turned out. I'm disappointed in the lake. I always seem to struggle with drawing lakes, but I always draw them a lot. Obviously nearby is a nature reserve, so I tend to walk there and draw the lakes a lot. So definitely something I want to work on and work out why I struggle to draw them and why I dislike it when I do. So for this one I just used Tombow brush pens, NeoColors and Prismacolor pencils again. I didn't take my paints with me because it was kind of an impromptu one. So considering that, I think it worked out quite well. Most of the time I always use gouache in the studio, so I think that's one of the reasons why things turn out very differently. But like I said, I was pleased with the building and some elements of this, so I was still happy with this spread. Day 207 was another in my 12x12 Talens sketchbook and another one from the Pacific Coast Highway road trip. And this one was interesting for me because with the polls I put up, the results were very different to what I would pick. So it was basically the opposite choices of what I would choose myself. And I think that's the fun of this challenge that I'm setting myself with this road trip and making it interactive, is because it does push me out of my comfort zone a bit. But overall I am pleased with this spread. I think I prefer the left-hand side more than the right. I was really pleased with how the signage and the mountains turned out. And as a spread, I think this follows on from the others, and I think the tones work as well. Like, obviously, it's very different scenes. We've got like a building here and then a very rural landscape, but the colours definitely work well together. And I really enjoyed like doing all the details, and again, this was done with gouache, Prismacolor pencils, and some NeoColor pastels. I think I could definitely have refined it a little bit more. There's some details I didn't add, but I try not to overthink some of these spreads, and this road trip idea is definitely something I want to continue. Day 208 was another panel spread, but this time I used a blue pencil and different shades which I normally would, and so the colour palette was very different, and it really surprised me how different it made the whole spread feel, and I was really happy with the result. So this was done when I was watching back a drawing session with Emma Carlisle, who I'm a patron of, and I had so much fun with this one. This was exploring Norway, which I always enjoy drawing from whenever I explore there myself with like MapCrunch or Google Maps. And again, these were timed panels, so they were 10 minutes each except for the one in the top right, which was 8 minutes. And like I said, the colour palette is very different to normal. It's a lot cooler, and I feel like I use a lot more blues than I normally would, but you can still see like the pop of reds and like warmer colours, which I tend to gravitate towards anyway, but it's definitely more blue toned than usual, and I was really pleased with how this one turned out. I don't think it photographed very well, which I struggle with sometimes, but I think in real life I think it comes across a lot nicer than the photo. Obviously I didn't overthink it because of the timer, so that always helps me, and so I really like the roughness and like the texture in this one, and some of the details that I managed to get in even though it was a short amount of time. You can see it's not as neat as my usual panel ones because obviously the panels are very wonky, but I think that really adds some charm to it, so I think that's why I enjoy doing time drawings so much, because it definitely adds more interest into the spread. As this was day 208, it also marked 2/3 of the way through my daily art challenge, which is mad. It means like we've only got 1/3 of the way to go, and when I'm filming this we have less than 100 days to go. So it feels like we've really broken the back on this project, and I feel like I can really see a difference from when I started, which is really exciting. So day 209 is the last day of week 35, and this one was kind of disappointing for me. There are definitely aspects I do like, and there's definitely things I would change too. So I painted these okapi. I was linked a resource which I have absolutely fallen in love with, and I'll link down below. But it's basically a flicker from the Biodiversity Heritage Library, and they've uploaded a lot of royalty-free images from old books that they've scanned in, and it's just full of gorgeous animals and nature and botanicals, and there are literally like 3,000 pages of gorgeous reference images that you can use. So definitely a resource which I'll be coming back to, and I definitely recommend checking out. And I wanted to draw these okapi because I was really taken by their patterns, and obviously their colours, their legs really stood out to me. And so I painted those in first. And I didn't get the layout quite right. They were too far over to the right, which is why I then added in this tree, and then I added this capuchin on his back. So obviously, it wasn't my original plan, so he's kind of floating a little bit, but I really was pleased with his face, and I was really happy with the baby Okapi's face as well. On this one, I kind of mixed the gouache on the paper, so you can see a lot of texture in their bodies, which I was pleased with. I think what lets it down is the background. It feels a little bit washed out, a bit too wishy-washy. I think if I added more details it would have helped, but at the time I didn't know what it needed. So in hindsight, I think I could have improved this spread, but the main thing was obviously the animals, and I was really pleased with their expressions and how they turned out. So I'll definitely come back to that flicker and find more animals and things to draw, but it was really nice to again do something different because I definitely don't do many mammals in my sketchbooks, and I definitely want to try and practice scenes more. So that rounds up weeks 34 and 35 of the daily art project, and at the end of these videos I always ask you what your favourite is. Mine is definitely this spread in the Little Royal Talens sketchbook. I was really pleased with the feelings of this one, and it definitely feels very my style, which I really enjoy. So I'd love if you pop yours down in the comments below because they're always different and I really enjoy hearing from you. If you want to keep up with the daily art challenge as I post, so I do create on the day and post on the day, you can follow me over on Instagram. I'm Katie_Moody, but I'll also come back on YouTube every 2 weeks and do a roundup, which gives you a little bit more detail and a little bit more of an insight into my thoughts on the challenge. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week with a new video. See you later.